David, thank you so much for your contribution. Has the demise of Larry Johnson been exaggerated?
No.
Expound.
All I want to say is no. Ryan Day certainly was asked about Larry during the presser yesterday, and it didn't sound like Larry was going anywhere, but it also doesn't sound like Ohio State is leaning into the problem and signing him to a longer-term deal to try and dissuade some of the negative recruiting about his age of being 71 years old and how much longer is he going to do it. And recruits love stability. And, you can really get into their heads and be like, I know for a fact that was something that Alabama and Clemson were using against Ohio State in terms of trying to flip Edric Houston. I mean, how long is Larry going to do it? And people are like, well, Nick Saban is 72. Well, there's a difference between the head coach and your position coach. And I do think, too, to a certain extent that it's not fair to hold everybody to the standard of Bosa, and Young, the wealth management fund of those three young men right there. But, Ohio State hasn't necessarily had the type of results from the defensive line in terms of the most obvious production numbers, sacks and TFLs and things of that nature. So, and I guess the last thing too is that Larry is still a 4-down front type of guy, and we're really seeing a lot of teams move to 3-down. And I think that if Jim Knowles were given his druthers, he would probably rather have more of a 3-3-5 type of situation than the 4-2-5 that they're running right now. So, I do think that Ohio State has to have some sort of plan in place for what life after Larry looks like in terms of being a position coach at Ohio State. I think that, we can go back to the class of 23. Ohio State was in on 3 of the nation's top defensive ends right at the end. Ohio State goes 0 for 3. Ohio State does land Edric Houston, which is a huge get, but Ohio State has and then loses Justin Scott. Ohio State doesn't get Dylan Stewart. Ohio State doesn't get Marquise Lightfoot. I think we run into the same situation with the class of 25 because Larry isn't getting younger. He's getting older. So I think that the demise of Larry Johnson, I don't know if I want to use the word demise, but I do think that there is more of an issue as each year passes of the hurdles that it presents for Ohio State, because as long as you keep signing Larry to 1-year deals and everything else, it's really easy to recruit against them.
I think there's 3 parts to this. I think the first part is he needs help with recruiting, which is a strange thing to say for a guy that has been outstanding. And by that, I mean, if you're going to go and pinpoint 5 great defensive ends in the country, you need to give him the financial support to go sign, a couple of the great defensive ends in the country. So, we don't talk dollars and cents in terms of recruiting a whole lot, but that is fast becoming what the whole game's all about. And, the sooner everybody embraces it, I guess the better off everybody's going to be. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is development. I think that, these guys come in they're blocks of clay, and he gets his hands into them and has to develop them and has to make them. I mean, Joey and Nick Bosa were, gifts from God the day, that they were born, but they weren't NFL players until Larry Johnson put his stamp on them. And so, we got to get back to that Midas touch of taking JT Tuimoloau off the hoof and Jack Sawyer off the hoof of what they are as high school players and make them All-American college players. And that hasn't happened here in the last several years. And that could be that maybe JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer just aren't cut out to be Nick Bosa and Joey Bosa. Very few people are. But at least give me half their production or something like that. And then production's that third part. It's like it's got to manifest and translate to something real on game day. You can't allow the Michigan quarterback to stand in the pocket for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and find his crappy receivers, who, don't have any business making these kind of plays against Ohio State. Well, they make them because the quarterback's got all day. And so you've put a great secondary in place. You have adequate linebackers, but you don't change the game up front on defense. And it's been this way now 3 straight years. You've been chewed up and spit out by Michigan. Those who do not learn from the past are condemned to repeat it. So to me, Ryan Day, Dave Biddle asked him straight out from our company, are you happy? Has the recruiting offensive and defensive line been what it needs to be to win at the highest level? And he hemmed and hawed and really didn't answer the question. And, then he got into Larry Johnson a little bit. And, he does expect him to come back, says he brings energy. The players love him, et cetera, et cetera. But, the results also need to be there. And I think that he needs help. He needs, he brings Kevin just one of the things that Coach Day said was he brings wisdom. So with wisdom don't pay the bills. So they got to get back to producing on game day and changing the game, and they just don't do that. They just don't seem to make that kind of impact.
Along those same lines, here we've got the appropriately named Dread Roberts. Too much stargazing at Ohio State. How's that worked out the last 3 years? Need better players, evaluations, less 247 ratings.
How's it worked out for Georgia?
Well, yeah, exactly. So not that there's not some truth there. Yes, there are some issues with the program. There are some things that need to be fixed. They're not firing on all cylinders. However, having worse recruiting classes is not the answer.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ohio State would have recruit better. It's had years upon years where it's stacked bad offensive line classes. There've been a few bright spots. You get your Paris Johnson Juniors, you get your Donovan Jacksons, but you also have guys that probably are not Big Ten players that are getting signed. I think that this year rectified it, but you did miss out on your huge dynamic potential left tackle, be it a Jordan Seaton or somebody like that. But I think that history will smile upon the Armstrong Twinsy and more. And then I'm very intrigued with what, Gabe Van Sickle can be. Just as we've kind of mentioned, defensive line recruiting has not been there. I don't know if it's necessarily a star chasing situation. Ohio State should have moved in months ago on Dom Kirks. Plain and simple. He's in your state. He really wants to, have the option to go to Ohio State, which is, code for saying, I think that, if you offer him, he comes to Ohio State even now. I think that the net sometimes does get cast a little too wide, but with that being said, the state of Ohio hasn't held up its end of the bargain in a lot of years. And everybody's like, well, this team would be a lot better if they recruited Ohio more. Recruit Ohio when the kids are there. There have been plenty of years that the kids have not been there. They're just, the population shifts and everybody's like, I don't want to hear about that. Well, it's true. Why is the state of North Carolina recruiting so hot? Why is the state of Arizona recruiting so hot? Because your Rust Belt families are moving to other states to find opportunity. And some of your kids that may have been playing up in Cleveland are now playing in Chandler, Arizona, or Charlotte, North Carolina, and places like that. So I understand, talking about the star chasing, and I even do agree to certain extents, but good is good. And, generally your higher rated kids, and I'm not saying that the evaluators for 247 or Rivals or On3, I'm not even going to put ESPN in the mix. Their evaluations are terrible, but I'm not going to say they're infallible. But they do a good job, and you're generally going to have a higher hit rate with your higher rated kids. But it's not absolute. I mean, but we also can't keep using the same tired excuse of James Laurinaitis was a 3-star. James Laurinaitis was a 3-star back during medieval times. I mean, that was a long time ago. So I don't know if we can necessarily, keep harping on that one.
Folks, we appreciate you being here typically every Wednesday, but of course these three, they tell me that they were busy yesterday. I don't know. I think they just were a bit lazy and put it off and figured they needed to show up at least today. So we rounded them up today.
Describe it.
But it's typically Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time, folks. So we appreciate you being here, but you never know when we need to switch it up, especially during the holidays. We've got to organize 4 schedules. So please like these videos and subscribe here at the Voice of College Football, and check out Steve's work at Bucknuts. Steve, what's going on over there these days?
Not much. One of the things I did yesterday was I went to Eric Williams-Dixon. Not Eric. Sam Williams-Dixon, isn't it? I'm getting all the names confused. Sam Williams-Dixon.
He's the jack of all trades, right?
Yes,
Nice.
running back
Samuel type.
Pickerington North. He only got to play in like 5 games this past year, and I always thought it was injuries. And as it turns out, the OHSAA has rules about transfers, and there was a custody issue. And basically, you can move your residence from one place to another, but, I can't explain it entirely. But if all of your custody and everything doesn't check out perfectly, they have this rule that they default back to, that you're ineligible for the last half of the regular season in any sport and the postseason. And the coach there, Nate Hillerich, said, yeah, we could have gotten an attorney and fought this, but the kind of feeling was he really had nothing to prove to anybody because he was already committed to Ohio State. They had a good enough team, and he made a great impact in the 5 games that he played. I guess he had 475 yards in the 5 games that he played. He did have a hamstring injury that kept him out of week 2, I think. I don't remember who they played, maybe an out-of-state team. But at any rate, very intriguing to kind of hear that story. I'd always thought it was injuries, but I guess it was this. Again, I want to swear, these stupid rules that the OHSAA has. They've got a basketball kid up in Cleveland right now, TJ Crumble, one of the top players in the country, who they're trying to screw around on this. He moved from Lutheran East to the powerhouse at Richmond Heights, and he established residence within the Richmond Heights village. And they're trying to say, well, the family hasn't sold the other house where they lived before. And I'm just like, that's not the OHSAA's function. If they tell you he's established residence in this spot, that should be it. I don't understand where they get off, dictating to people. I mean, I know that they put rules in place to prevent people from stockpiling talent with transfers and people living in one place and playing somewhere else, but that's really not the case in either of these situations. And a judge yesterday granted Crumble an injunction. He can play the whole season at Lutheran East, which that's great. But any rate, I saw Sam Williams-Dixon yesterday. Very intrigued by him. I'm going to have a story about him on our site probably later today. Last basketball home non-conference game today, 6 p.m. against New Orleans on Big BTN Plus. So about 30 people will get to watch it. In my preview, you guys will get a kick out of this. I said, fans living in Central Ohio may attend this game. That's exactly how I put it. You are permitted. This is not a COVID game. You are permitted to purchase a ticket and drive down there and go to this game. So we'll see. They haven't had more than 10,000 for only 2 games so far this season. We'll see how that goes. And I did get to go to Atlanta last weekend for the UCLA game. A lot of fun that was. And looking forward to when UCLA brings that hack and hold brand of defense to the Big Ten next year.
Yeah, I guess they play the physical basketball on the West
my
Coast. They
God.
kind of trade reputations when it comes to football and basketball.
Well, it's Mick Cronin. Mick Cronin, he has his players basically fouling on every possession and daring the officials to call it. But, whatever.
I made a early New Year's resolution the other day to not call my viewers morons and idiots on a regular basis, or maybe not at all.
Or your guests.
I was part of, I don't do that to my guests. Come on. I at least draw that line. More affectionately call them knuckleheads. They seem to be okay with that at times. So knuckleheads. But Dredd made another stupid comment about, but I did make this condition. I can call their actions moronic and idiotic. So we get through it that way. But that the 247 or other recruiting services ratings don't matter. And that's just complete garbage. They do matter. This is obvious to everyone who has a functional brain. All right, Tony, what have you been working on? Not that I don't know, but
I'll be right. I'll got to finish up an Aaron Nolan story that'll go up today. Ryan Day's thoughts on Aaron Nolan, the quarterback, 5-star quarterback out of Carrollton, Georgia. And then I'll also put together what I know, what I think, what I wonder about the recruiting class for today or tomorrow. That'll be available at the BuckeyeHuddle.com on the message board there for subscribers.